All right. So at the same time, the British are trying to deal with this like rising independence movement, rising nationalist movement. It's not quite an independence movement yet, but the Indians are definitely getting more organized. So the British passed something called the Indian Councils Act of 1892. And the British Councils Act of 1892 supposedly gives the Indians representation, right? It gives them a seat in the like territorial government, right? But the problem is that the Indians actually don't get a seat, right? That's not true. The Indians get, excuse me, the Indians get seats, they get welcomed in, but they don't have any voting power, right? So the Indians are not given any voting power at all. And the Brits are just trying to kind of do the same thing that the Afrikaners did with the Bantustans. You guys remember how the Bantustans, they made the Bantustans independent, right? Supposedly autonomous regions independent. What was the actual result of making the Bantustans independent? What actually happened? Yash, you remember what happened?
Uh, they were like they're still dependent on everything from the main like from Cape and stuff like that.
Right. They had no money and they weren't connected to the economic system at all, right? And so the independent Bantustans became even more poor and even more like divided and even weaker. The Brits are trying to do that in India as well, right? And so they're trying to trick the Indians into thinking that the Indians have representation, but really it's not. It's like fake representation. Okay. Well, the Indians see through this and the Indians start getting more and more upset. They're going to blast them in newspapers. They're going to be, protesting about this. They're going to be fighting about this. Okay. Um, and Talak is getting progressively more and more popular as we get going. Ilha, who is Talak? When I talk about Talak, who is he?
Yeah, isn't he like the so-called father of Indian nationalism? And
Okay,
there's like mixed like opinions about him.
right. And why do we care about Talak? Why do I care about Talak's opinions at this time period? Let's go.
Uh,
Yeah, let's have Tiffany answer that. Why should we care about Talak at this time period? Ilha's correct in the way he identified Talak, but Tiffany, I want you to identify why Talak is important.
Um, is he important because he kind of he he was the representation for this type of I don't want to say movement, but he told the people what Britain was actually doing. Like I don't know how to explain it.
Right? He's developing what? What very, very, very important concept is Talak developing?
Nationalism.
Yeah, specifically Indian nationalism, and even more specifically, Hindu nationalism, right? Talak is creating the marriage between Hindu nationalism and Indian nationalism. Okay? Nationalism against the British, first of all, but nationalism also against the Muslims. Okay? Talak is trying to make it in the minds of every Indian that Hindu equals Indian and Indian equals Hindu, right? That equation doesn't include the British and it doesn't include the Muslims. Okay? This failed Councils Act is going to make Talak even more popular. Okay? The British are then going to shoot themselves in the foot even more with the partition of Bengal. Okay? So Bengal is this blue area over here. Okay, it's this whole side of India. They speak Bengali over here. That's the language that they speak, and it's the wealthiest part of India at this time period. Okay, we've seen Bengal a couple of times. Okay, the British block this off and they make it its own government. This is the brainchild of Mr. Lord Curzon over here, right? Lord Curzon thinks this is a great idea. Why is he trying to do this? Why does he wants to cut India in half? Well, not in half, but why does he want to cut India off from Bengal? What's the value of doing that? Wentao, what do you think the value of doing that is?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, what's the value of the British cutting Bengal away from the rest of India? Wentao, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just thinking, could it just be because there's a lot of major rivers and stuff for plantations?
So there are, right? We have all those indigo farms. Okay, so the first thing you can put in here is that this is wealthy and it has some of the best farmland in the entire country, right? Some of the best farmland in the entire country. It's also really densely populated, quite a few people here, okay? But what's the other advantage? What major city are you cutting off? Yeah, Drew?
Aren't you cutting off Calcutta?
Yeah. Calcutta is probably the most important Bengal city, right? And one of the most important cities in India, right? Calcutta is home to all these universities. It's home to the Bengali Renaissance. It's home to, the political capital of India, right? So they're trying to cut Calcutta off. But Calcutta is also definitively an Indian city, right? Like it may not be speaking Hindi as its primary language, but it's definitively Hindi, right? Or definitively Indian, right? It's an important city for the identity of Indians, right? It's one of the oldest cities of India. It's one of the primary cities of India. Like it's an important city for India. Okay, it would be like cutting off Boston from the rest of the United States, right? It may not be the most important. It may not be New York or Washington D.C., but Boston's a really important city for American identity, isn't it? Right? It's the seat of our revolution. It's the cradle of America, right? In a long way, and Boston's a really important city, the same way Calcutta is. Britain is trying to use their good old strategy of divide and conquer. They're trying to divide this off. In India, that's starting to get a little bit too uppity, a little bit too problematic, right? They're going to cut them off. That way they can concentrate on making money here and concentrate on suppressing people over here, okay? Here's the other issue. By cutting Bengal off like this, they're creating a state that is 55% Muslim and 45% Hindu. Okay, you're creating because this is the modern day country right here is Bangladesh, right? And Bangladesh is a Muslim country. And so you're cutting it off, and you're making a Muslim majority here. The Hindus are enraged. They're enraged about this. Okay, Calcutta is a Hindu city. It's a primarily Hindu city, right? And it's one of the oldest Hindu cities of all time, right? Like it is an ancient Hindu city, and it's been a Hindu city since they invented cities, right? Like it's been that way forever, and now it's being ruled by Muslims. Okay, this is going to cause huge problems for India, and it's going to literally blow up in their face. Okay, for the next like 4 years, Calcutta and all of Bengal are going to be subject to a series of terrorist attacks, where it's going to be multiple attacks every year for about 5 years or so. Okay, and the terrorist attacks are being carried out by Hindus. These are Hindus blowing up British places and blowing up Muslim places. Okay. All right. Eventually, they're going to have to back down on this, right? They reversed it in 1911. So it lasts for about 6 years, but it's really problematic. They have really made this very problematic, and they've pissed off a lot of Hindus, and the Hindus have started blowing stuff up, right? Like things have gotten bad. Bad for the Brits, anyway. Okay. I want to introduce you to the next really big concept here, okay? The big concept is called Swadeshi, the Swadeshi movement. This is going to be a movement. This is going to be a movement started by Tilak, started by a lot of people, including Tilak, and it's going to be really picked up by Gandhi later on. Gandhi is going to be, the big leader of this movement as we move on. But Gandhi's not part of the story yet. Okay, Swadeshi, if Swaraj, Swa means self, Raj means rule. So Swaraj was self-rule. Swadeshi, Swa means self. You guys know what Deshi means? Yeah, Drew?
Doesn't it mean country?
Yeah, so literally it translates as self-country, right? Like a self-country. But we normally understand it to mean self-sustainability. They want the country to be self-sustainable. You're right, literally it does mean self-country, but that is kind of unhelpful for the actual definition, right? But it means like self-sufficient, okay? It's an economic movement, an economic protest movement, where they're trying to focus on getting Indians to make things for themselves. They're trying to undermine the British economy by getting Indians to become economically independent. That means Indians have to make their own stuff. Okay. The British are doing to the Indians what they do to all of their colonies, where they take the natural resources from the economy and then they ship them off to England, make consumer goods, and then ship the goods back to India and then make the Indians buy it. Right? You want to buy a plate? Okay. The material gets, ceramic material gets sent to England. They make the plate, they send the plate back to Bombay, and then you buy it in Bombay. Right? You want to buy some clothes? Your clothes have to travel around the world before you can put them on, right? The Indian leaders, Tilak and later on Gandhi, are going to look at this and they're going to say, this is freaking stupid. Indians have been making their own clothes since, clothes were invented, right? India is like an ancient country, right? It's been around for 10,000 years, right? Indians know how to make clothes. They haven't been naked for 10,000 years waiting for the British to teach them, right? They know how to do this. They're not stupid. And so there's going to be this big, big push for Indians to make their own stuff. In the beginning, it starts with stuff that's easy, like cloth and clothes and stuff. And it will eventually move up into like factories, right? Where they want to make their own like trains and ships and cars and things. Okay. But in the beginning, it's going to be clothes. There's a couple things I want to point out about this movement. Okay. This movement is very, very driven by women. Okay. Women are leading this economic movement. It's very, very important that women are the center of this movement. The men are doing the boycotting. The men are leading the boycotts, and the men are leading kind of the political protesting and stuff like that. But the women are the ones who are making the stuff. The women are the ones who are actually driving the economic movement. They're actually making the clothes and making the spinning wheel and stuff. This is going to become such an important thing that the spinning wheel becomes the symbol on the Indian flag, right? If you think the Indian flag has that circle thing in the middle of it, right? It's a stripe, the orange, white, and green stripes, and then it has the circle thing in the middle. That circle thing, at least in the beginning, is a spinning wheel. Spinning wheel from these things. They do later on change it, and they say that it's a spiritual wheel representing spirituality, like ancient spirituality, tying it to the ancient Hindu traditions and stuff. But at least in the beginning, it's intended as a spinning wheel. Okay. This movement is not going to go away, and this movement, you have to know the word, use the word. Okay. This is one of the three big movements that we're going to get: Swaraj, Swadeshi, and then the next one is going to come with Gandhi in a couple minutes. All right. Also, after the partitioning of Bengal, we're going to get the creation of the Muslim League. The Muslim League is going to be the primary political party of the Muslims. It's founded at the university, Aligarh University in Dhaka, which is, one of the biggest, most prominent Muslim universities. Dhaka today is the capital of Bangladesh, right? At this time period, it's part of Bengal. It's the second largest city of Bengal after Calcutta. But today it's the capital of Bangladesh. Okay, so Aligarh University. It starts with this guy, Syed Ahmed Khan. He's like a professor at the university, and he's the guy who's like kind of the intellectual leader, agreeing to get started. Aga Khan over here. Aga Khan is like a rich guy who's gotten rich working with the Brits. He's like a businessman. He's going to become the first president. He's actually not super important. The guy who is vitally important to this movement is the guy in the middle here, Jinnah. Okay, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the father of Pakistan. He is by far the most important leader. I believe he's the second president of the Muslim League, maybe the third. But once he takes over the Muslim League, he's going to lead the Muslim League all the way until independence, when Pakistan becomes an independent country. All right. And he's going to change. As the movement changes, he's going to change as well. In the beginning, he is pro-independence and working with the Hindus. And he believes in the beginning, he believes that Muslims and Hindus can work together as a unified India. He's going to change as violence starts breaking out and as the division starts to become worse, right? And he's going to, by the end of the 1920s, he's going to be pro and independent. Okay, but by the time independence happens in 1947, Jinnah is going to become the first president of Pakistan. Okay. I regret to tell you he's going to lose the mustache eventually. I'm sorry, he's going to lose the mustache. I know, Tiffany, you were really looking at him, I get that. I understand, but he's going to lose the mustache and going to just become another clean shaven guy, unfortunately. All right. Okay. With this stuff going on, the elections of 1910 become this important kind of step. The Brits are trying to keep India happy. So they're going to enact something called the Morley-Minto reforms. The technical name for it is called the Indian Councils Act of 1910, but nobody ever calls it that. They all call it the Morley-Minto reforms. That's probably because there's like 6 Indian Councils Acts, right? And so they're hard to keep track of them all. But the Morley-Minto reforms is basically where the Indians are going to start getting their first actual membership in the Indian Parliament. Oh, whoops. They're going to get their first membership in the actual Indian Parliament, where they're going to have a say in actual laws in domestic rule. Okay, this is the Brits trying to make the Indians feel better and give them just a little bit of independence. Okay, in the ruling council of England, what are we doing here? What's our problem? Why is this thing being stupid? Okay. In the ruling council for India, it's still going to have a majority British people, but then the seats for Indians are going to be cut in half. Muslims and Hindus get half and half of the seats. Okay. Michael, do we stop, Michael? Yeah, Michael, what's the problem with giving half the seats to the Muslims and half the seats to the Hindus?
My first guess is gridlock. So it's hard to get any policies done if they conflict over stuff.
Okay, so that's one problem. There's a bigger problem though. Raul, can you see the bigger problem?
The Hindus just don't want to work with the Muslims, they feel like they should be. They feel like they should have more say when it comes to India than the Muslims.
There we go. Right? There we go. The Hindus at this point are like 75% of the population. And the Hindus are saying, if we're 75% of the population, then why aren't we 75% of the seats? Right? Why aren't they? Somebody unmute yourself. Why aren't they 75% of the seats? Why aren't the British giving the Hindu seats?
Is it just because the British are still doing that divide and conquer thing where they want those two to fight?
Exactly. 100% exactly. Right? The British are still trying to elevate the Muslims, right? To undermine the Hindus. And the Hindus know this. They're not stupid, right? They know this is going on. They make this big show of this. The King of England comes out to India. He officially gets crowned the King of India as well, right? Like they make a big show of it, trying to show to the Indians that they're part of the empire and that they're, equal members of the empire and stuff, right? But the Indians aren't falling for it. At this point in time, it's clear to the Indians that they are not equal members of the empire. And this independence movement is really starting to grow. We have one more guy that we need to meet before we meet Gandhi. Gopal Krishna Gokal. Gopal Krishna Gokal. He's going to be one of our big leaders. He's going to stand in opposition to Tilak, right? So if we have Tilak on the extreme revolutionary side, right? If we have a revolutionary change guy, we always have to have an incremental change guy, okay? So Gokal is our incremental change. He's actually has a lot of parallels with Booker T. Washington, if we're thinking about it, because Gokal is going to focus almost exclusively on education reforms. He's really, really interested in education reforms, and he really, this is what he's going to be most famous for. He's going to spend a lot of his time working on education reforms. He's going to open up schools around the country. He's going to work on this stuff. Gokal is going to make an argument that the best way for India to gain its independence is for India to gain its independence piece by piece by piece over time, right? He looks at the way that Canada and Australia got their independence, and he thinks that that's the good way for India because you can avoid a war that way, right? Canada gets its independence, like Canada's independence is like 1860, right? When Canada kind of lobbied Parliament and got their independence, right? But Canada doesn't actually get its full independence until like 1985. Canada goes 120 years of incremental independence, where every couple of elections they get a little bit more independence. Gokal is arguing for that kind of independence, okay? And he thinks that England is going to be able to hold India up in the world, in the global economy, and as India becomes more and more independent, they release one little thing, one little thing, one little thing. That if India just becomes independent as it is, India is too poor, it's too chaotic, it's too disunified. Like he's afraid that India will just collapse. Okay? Tilak hates this, hates this. Tilak is strongly opposed to Gokal, right? Gokal and Tilak are going to be like unfriendly rivals with each other, right? They do not like each other very much, right? Because Tilak is like, screw that, let's independence, let's burn London down, right? Like Tilak is revolutionary change all the way, right? Gokal, you can see in his quote here, he wants a responsible association with the administration. Administration is British in this case. Okay. Another good example of kind of Gokal, the kind of guy he is his organization, the Servants of India. This is his organization he's most famous for. He basically creates a service charity group where people are going to donate like money and time to go helping like the untouchables and helping the poorest members of India, the lowest caste members and stuff like that, right? Like he's going to actually dedicate a big portion of his life to doing that kind of work. Unfortunately for Gokal, a lot of Indians aren't as patient as he is. A lot of Indians are looking at this and they're growing more and more impatient. Okay. Gokal is going to become Gandhi's first big friend in the movement when Gandhi comes back, right? Gandhi will link up with Gokal right away, and then Gandhi from Gokal will start linking up with other people, right? But what happened to Tilak? Okay, well, here he is. So I told you Tilak is starting to get more dangerous, more extreme as we go. Well, he's getting more extreme, that's for sure. Okay, so we're going to get this in 1908. In 1908, there's an assassination attempt where they're trying to assassinate Lord Hardinge, Hardinge, Hardinge. And he's like the assistant viceroy of India. He's like the assistant governor of India, a British guy. And he's like riding his elephant through Calcutta, and he's like, going on and showing British power. And a bunch of dudes throw grenades up and try to kill him. They do not succeed in killing him. They injure him, but they do not kill him. And those guys are arrested. And once they're arrested, they're linked directly to Tilak. They work for Tilak, and they are directly connected to Tilak. And so the British finally have a reason to throw him in jail. They arrest him and they throw him in jail in Mandalay in Burma. They throw him in jail in Burma, and he does what every revolutionary does once you throw them in jail. What do revolutionaries always do? Always, 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 every revolutionary, when you throw them in jail, what do? Yeah, Drew?
They always write back to the original people in the movement.
They write a book. Exactly, right? They always write a book. That's 100% correct, Drew. All right, so Talak writes a book. He writes a book. He's going to do a modern day translation of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, the Bhagavad Gita, a modern day translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and he's going to write a book called the Gita Rashaya, Rashasya, Gita Rashasya. All right, so Hindus in the room. Rahul, can you tell us what the Bhagavad Gita is?
It's a religious text.
A religious text. Okay, what else? What else can you say?
It's the story about I really don't know if I'm right about this. But it's a story about these two warring. They're of the same family, but it's like these cousins against each other. I know there's a guy named Arjun. He's an archer, and
Okay, all right.
that's all I know.
Yash, can you add, before we let Drew answer every question, Yash, what else can you say about the Bhagavad Gita?
I guess, I mean, all I could really say is that it's a fundamental book towards what it means to be Indian, I guess. A lot of stuff come from this book. A lot of stories and tales that we use come from the book. So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's interesting that you said it's the story of what it takes to be Indian. It's interesting you said that because that's not what the book is. It's what it takes to be.
think that's that.
Yeah.
I don't, that's
You
not what I
said
said.
you said Indian when you meant Hindu. It's an interesting slip of the tongue, right? Talak would be very happy with your slip of the tongue. All right, how about you, Rachakanda?
So it's essentially a Hindu scripture, which is actually part of a bigger whole of text called, I think, the Mahabharata.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay, so what we need here, we don't need to get into the actual like philosophy of it, but you guys were able to kind of piece together what it is. What we need to know here is the Bhagavad Gita is as close as we're going to get to a Hindu Bible. Okay. Hinduism doesn't really have one central Bible like the way Christianity does or Quran for Islam, right? Hinduism doesn't have that. Hinduism has a collection of like Vedic scripts and the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, right? Like Hinduism has a collection of these things. The Bhagavad Gita is like half philosophy and like telling people what to do, right? Like telling you how to live your life, and half like stories, right? So it's a combination of those two things. Okay, so Talak puts it into modern language. The Bhagavad Gita is old, right? It's like thousands of years old. It's written in like ancient Sanskrit. It's really, really hard to read, right? He puts it into the modern language, and then he writes this Gita Rashasaya. The Gita Rashasaya is an analysis of the Bhagavad Gita. He analyzes the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the traditional way to understand the Bhagavad Gita is that Hindus should avoid bad action, right? By avoiding bad action, this is the tradition. This is like traditional thousands of years of Hinduism, right? That you should avoid bad action. Bad action gets you bad karma. Bad karma hurts you in reincarnation, right? So you should avoid bad action. He changes that. He says, no, the correct thing is not to avoid bad action, but it's instead to do good action. He says, in order to be a good Hindu, it's not enough just to avoid bad things. You must actively seek out and do good things. You must help the poor. You must heal the sick. You must feed the hungry. You must do these things, and you must do good stuff. Okay? This also means you must serve your country and help your country become independent. His book doesn't say England, but wink, it's about England, right? He publishes this in Marathi. That's his language, Marathi. It's the language of like Bombay, the primary language of Bombay. And what he translates it from Marathi, he also translates it into Hindi, and he translates it into Gujarati. And then it gets smuggled out of the prison, right? A sympathetic guard smuggles it out page by page as he's writing it on pencil, right, on these pages. And then they publish it, they get it off to Bombay, they publish it, they translate it, right? They translate it into like Telugu, and they translate it into Bengal, and they translate it into Tamil and Punjabi, right? And they translate it into all the Indian languages. They translated it in like 17 or 18 Indian languages before they translated it into English. And once Tilak gets out of jail, this book has become popular across the whole country, and the Brits don't even know it. They purposely didn't translate it into English, because they didn't want the Brits to see. Right? And Tilak says this isn't for the Brits. He's like, this isn't for white people. Right? He's like, white people have their own books. They can go read those. Right? This is for us, is what he says. Tilak is mostly out of our story now. Okay, while he's in prison, he gets sick. He develops diabetes while he's in the prison. He doesn't live for very much longer. He lives for about 5 or 6 more years. He does join some other organizations and stuff, but he's not the fiery leader he used to be. He dies. He dies off pretty quickly, relatively quickly. But he is calling for this action. And again, linking ancient Hinduism to modern day action, right? Linking these two things together. All right. I'm going to have to do this. We're a little bit behind. I know we're going long, but we're behind. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to knock this out, okay? We'll do World War I real quick. All right. World War I breaks out in 1914. In 1914, and England forces India to join the war. Okay, England brings in its entire empire into the war, and India, of course, being the largest part of the empire, is going to fuel the largest number of soldiers. Up until this point, we have not talked about Sikhs. Okay, up until this point, we have not talked about Sikhs. Okay, Sikhs are these guys in the turbans here. Okay, do any of you guys know? Do any of you guys know anything about Sikhism, really? You guys basically know nothing about it? Okay. All right. Sikhism is a monotheistic religion. It's small. It's about 2% of the Indian population, right? It's a relatively small population. One of the things that Sikhism requires is what they call the 5 Ks. And they have these 5 things that Sikhs have to wear and carry with them at all times. Okay, so they have to grow their hair out, and they have to wear it in a turban, right? They have to wear a special cotton underwear, right? The turban tells them about the nobility of God and their relationship to God and the nobility of humans. The underwear tells them about purity and chastity and controlling your actions. An iron bracelet tells them to control their hands, right? That their hands can be used to destroy or to support, right? And so they have to control their actions. The wooden comb, they have a comb where they comb it into their hair, and then you tie it in a certain way under the turban. The wooden comb is about respect for the hygiene of your body and keeping yourself healthy, right? One of the items that they have to carry with them is a kirpan, Karpin. It's a dagger. And the dagger is required, it's ordered by God, that God tells you that you have to do this. You have to carry the dagger in order to defend yourself, and more importantly, defend the weak. Okay. One of the other things that they have, like commandments, essentially, right? The first commandment, the first teaching is that there is one God. The second teaching is that all people are equal. All people are equal, and everyone must be defended, right? So you have to stick up for the weak. You have to stick up for the helpless. And this includes women. Sikhism is the only religion on the planet that explicitly says that women are equal. Every other religion on the planet says women are not equal. Sikhism is the only one. And it says it right there in the second commandment, right? The second, they don't call it a commandment. I think they call it the central teaching, right? Anyway, this means if God has commanded that everyone carry a dagger and everyone is equal, that you have like 3 and 4-year-olds carrying daggers with them. Okay. This means that the Sikhs teach combat and fighting and self-defense from the time that toddlers can walk. Right? They have classes on self-defense and fighting from like ages like 3, 4, 5, 6 for both boys and girls. Okay, women are expected to be warriors because everyone is equal. Women are political leaders of Sikhs. Women are supposed to be equal. Okay. The result is that the Sikhs oftentimes are viewed as a warrior culture. That they have this like warrior ethos kind of built into their religion, built into their culture, built into the way that they act, right? That the Sikhs are a warrior culture, right? Hindus aren't a warrior culture. Like we do have Hindu armies, like we do have Hindus rise up, right? But it's not built into Hinduism, right? In fact, Hinduism has nonviolence built into it, right? Buddhists have nonviolence built into it. Sikhs understand that violence is necessary. The result is, historically speaking, the Sikhs have been the primary Indian soldiers of the British. The British recruit the Sikhs, and the Sikhs volunteer for the army. Okay? Up until now, for decades, the Sikhs have been the primary soldiers that the Brits have been using in conquering Afghanistan and the stands in the middle, right? Central Asia. The primary soldiers they've been using are Sikhs. And when the war breaks out, the primary soldiers they use are Sikhs. Now, pretty quick, they start recruiting Muslims and Hindus also, right? But the first groupings are Sikhs. Now, this matters because Punjab is about to start its rebellion. Punjab is the state where the Sikhs are. It's the homeland of the Sikhs. Okay? And it's right on the border of Pakistan and India. Okay? Right on the border of Pakistan and India. And it's the homeland of the Sikhs. It's not exclusively Sikhs. Sikhs are like 75% of Punjab, right? The other 25% is Muslims and Hindus who live there, right? But it's where almost all the Sikhs live in Punjab, right? You don't get a lot of Sikhs in the other parts of India, not very many. Okay, they're very, very concentrated there. England is going to pass these 2 laws. Okay, the Defense of India Act 1915, and then the Rowlatt Act of 1919. Let's define these 2 things. The Defense of India Act of 1915 does 2 things. One, it forces Indians to defend England. So Indians can be drafted into the war. 2, it makes it illegal. It makes all nationalist publications, groups, and gatherings illegal. It makes all nationalist publications, gatherings, and groups illegal. Okay, the Rowlatt Act at the end of the war, they passed this after the war. They extend the restrictions of the first act, and they also make it so that the Brits can arrest anybody with nationalist leanings. Now, you may think that they're aiming at Bengal, right? They're not. They're aiming at Punjab. They're aiming at Punjab when they say this. Now, this seems weird, right? I just told you that the Sikhs are the loyal soldiers of the army, right? The loyal soldiers of the British Empire, right? So why are the Brits targeting them? Because of this. The Ghadar Mutiny, 1915. The war breaks out and there's a mutiny, a 1915 mutiny. And it's called the Ghadar Mutiny. Here's the deal. The Ghadar Mutiny is founded by the Punjab diaspora. The Punjab diaspora. Tiffany, do you remember what the word diaspora means?
I don't.
Oh no, we used it just not that long ago. Ilha, can you help her out?
I forgot what it meant.
Oh no. Drew wants to answer every question. Let's try one more person before we get to Drew. All right, Yash, do you remember what it is?
It's the spread of like the people outwards, out of India, and like the connections that come from outside to inside.
Yeah. So it's the technical definition is the ethnicity, the ethnic group of people who are removed from their homeland. Right? So Yash, Dhruv, and Rahul, you guys are members of the Indian diaspora, right? Ilha, you're Chinese diaspora, I think, right? Is that what we said? Oh no, sorry. You're not Chinese, Ilha? Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm Korean. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I called you Chinese last time and you were deeply offended. I'm sorry. Wen Tao and Michael, you guys are Chinese. Right? Yeah. All right. So Ilha is part of the Korean diaspora. Wen Tao and Michael are Chinese diaspora. Tiffany, I'm not sure where your family's from, Tiff. I don't know. Zamudio is a Spanish name, but I don't know.
Yeah, Mexico.
Mexican, right? So Tiffany's from the Mexican diaspora, then, right? I, Veenstra, I'm from the Dutch diaspora, right? So this is from the Punjabi diaspora, and it's primarily in San Francisco. It's primarily in San Francisco, but after the group in San Francisco gets organized, it spreads to Vancouver, Canada, and Berlin, Germany. This is actually the flag of the Gadar political party in San Francisco. So it's a political party of Punjabis who are there. My bell just rang, so my mock trial is coming in just a moment. What this is it's a mutiny that's planned for the Punjabis to rise up in Punjab against the British during the war. And then once it's in Punjab, it's supposed to spread to the other states. The mutiny never happens. The British undermine this. They send spies in, they break up the groups, they arrest them all in Canada and stuff. And as you see in this picture here, they shoot them all. The Gadar Mutiny is started. The Gadar Mutiny is started by Hindus, by Punjabi Hindus. It's not Sikhs, it's Hindus. But they speak Punjabi. They're from Punjab, right? When the British start to arrest people and execute people, the British start to arrest Hindu leaders and Sikh leaders. And there's very few Sikhs involved in this, okay? This is going to devastate the Sikh soldiers because the Sikh soldiers feel this as an ultimate betrayal, right? They've been loyal soldiers this entire time. Not only are they loyal soldiers, they're here dying on the soils of Europe to defend England, and England is executing their leaders back home. Okay? The Sikhs have not been part of this movement, but they're about to join the movement. Okay, when the Sikhs come home from World War I, the Sikhs are part of the movement. There's a thing about warrior cultures. You can't push them around very much. Warrior cultures have a tendency to fight back, right? So we'll leave it there. But I'm gonna let you know there's a lot of bloodshed in the next class. Yeah. Cool. All right, I gotta go. My bell's rung. My mock trial people are coming. Unless you guys have a question, I'm gonna let you guys go.